Okay, this is a special edition of Stimulus and Response. Today, my co-host Jeremy and Smith is off, and in his place, we have Jeff Baietto, who is the COO and I believe co-founder. Is that right, Jeff? You're the co-founder?
It is, yeah.
Of Injoy Global. Can you quickly, Jeff, just give us a little bit of a rundown as to what Injoy Global is and what you guys are doing in the world?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much for having me. This is so fun and such an honor. So thank you, Damon.
My pleasure.
So Enjoy Global, we are in essence a software company that we're using the latest in neuroscience and positive psychology and gamification to help companies create the most positive and productive culture possible in just a series of 30-day challenges that all their teams and employees can go through and really develop the muscles and the mindsets that we all know are kind of at the core for success in all its meaning.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And the reason I wanted to have Jeff on is because we also are working together. We're running a 30-day flow challenge through Enjoy Global. We're partnering together and collaborating together. And so we just ran our first challenge last month. We have another one coming up on July 13th. And I'll link this in the show notes so that people who are listening can check that out as well. And also just check out what all the great things that Enjoy Global are doing. So Jeff, here's one of the premises that we like to use on this podcast. My co-host Jeremy put this towards me. He asked me what my cover story was. And so in a way, I guess I feel like I wanted to ask you what Enjoy Global was and kind of get your cover story. But the real essence of this podcast is really to try to get a little bit farther into the secret garden. So this is, as we bill ourselves, part therapy session. I am a high performance coach. Jeremy is a journalist. And we just like to probe topics that are interesting to us and that we hope that are also interesting to our audience. And today I want to talk about some of the kind of the higher level, deeper subjects. And I'll start with, as I know you have a master's degree in spiritual psychology. Mm-hmm. And I want to start there. I want to start a little bit with spiritual psychology. But before I do, I want to share a quick story about my upbringing. And I want to think a little bit about religion and spirituality. So I was raised in the Midwest. I was raised in Michigan. And I experienced two different religions. So I lived in a college town. I grew up Catholic. And in our college town, there was a Catholic church, St. John's. And at St. John's, it felt very hippie. There was acoustic guitars. Father Folio would talk about the Bible in ways that felt really approachable. He was also, a good tennis player, which was something that I related with. And there were a lot of college kids that would come to church. And I felt like this was a really beautiful way to approach religion. As a young guy, I loved going to church. Now, when I went down to suburban Detroit to my grandmother O'Neill's house, that was a different religion. Now, that religion was also Catholicism, but in her house was much stricter. For example, before church, we couldn't eat. At church, there were very few songs that stimulated me. And on the whole, it felt kind of scary and really kind of locked in and closed up. So as a young guy, I remember just sort of like feeling aware that, hey, wait, these are both Catholic churches and yet they're completely different. So I wanted to just kind of like reach out to you and ask about your upbringing. Certainly want to get to your rationale for spiritual psychology, but how were you raised and where were you raised and how did religion fit into your childhood?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm from a small town in the Midwest as well, just 9,000 people in a small town in Wisconsin. We lived, in the country. We didn't have a farm, but we were surrounded by farmland and everyone knew everybody. There was, no locked doors. My dad was an optometrist and coached my little league teams. And so it was just a very kind of idyllic little town, also raised Catholic. And we had one Catholic church or a Catholic school in town. So I went through, and at that time they still had some nuns. They were transitioning kind of out, but I had a Sister Mary Sponza and a Sister Mary Robertine and all the Sister Marys. And so that was a very big part of my upbringing, church on Sunday, but it was closer to the strict one, but we did a lot of those things without any meaning behind them. So the no meat on Friday, or giving up something, for Catholics, for Lent, there's often and it's again, in its essence, it's really beautiful, but what it had translated for us was, giving up candy for 39 days. And on the 40th day, we ate as much chocolate as we possibly could on Easter Sunday. So, I felt like it was more of going through the motions. Church was not something that we looked forward to. Very boring, very rigid, super boring homilies or sermons. At that time, there was no connection to youth, the music was awful. And it was just, again, it was an obligation, but not something to look forward to.
Yeah. And so, again, for me, coming into my teenage years, I remember feeling like, wait, there's got to be something deeper than this. I felt the same way around Easter, same kind of deal, where these things felt like rituals, but they didn't necessarily like hit me on a deep level.
Yeah.
But I also remember as a young guy being exposed to some spiritual teachers. In my era, there were tapes, and my dad I guess I could call him New Age to some degree, but we listened to Dr. Wayne Dyer. We listened to Dr. Leo Buscaglia, who was a professor at USC who taught a course around love. I was exposed to some of those types of people early on as well, and their message seemed to resonate a little bit more with me. How did you either make the transition or enter into, or what does spirituality mean to you?
Well, from a young age, and for whatever reason, that desire, and I think it's probably in all of us at some point, but for me, it was a louder voice from early on. I remember asking the questions of, who am I and why am I here? Where did I come from? In that kind of spiritual sense. And I wanted the answers to come from church. And I really wanted the priests to have answers. And I remember in one of our, religion classes in 4th grade, asking a question and feeling really disappointed in the quality of the answer. But the desire to know and the desire to have, I don't know if an understanding is the right word, but just some sort of exploration into the mystery of the universe and of, how it all happened, and the beauty and all of that was there from early on. At one point I thought and I loved the idea. I was very sensitive as a kid on all levels. So, but mostly when things were hurting somewhere, that I felt that very strongly. And so watching commercials of, poverty or that would ruin my emotional state for the day. Would be down and just really. So I was also eager to help from an early age. I had a desire and for a while entertained the idea of becoming a priest, but it was short-lived because, again, I really wanted family. The idea of a celibate life, there's some just archaic notions, again, in Catholicism that didn't work at all for me, but I didn't feel they worked in today's world at all. It just felt like it was in a huge need for an upgrade or, a 2.0 or some sort of evolution, which it hadn't done. So that was the kind of the starting point. And then, what else is there? And that started to be the exploration of other religions and then ultimately just what is it that's at the core of all of that? Is there some sort of universalness to this desire to connect with a spiritual nature or have some connection to more than just the physical nature of my being?
It's so interesting. And I was an only child, and I would consider myself also very sensitive, also I was an empath in a lot of ways. And I hurt when the world around me hurt. But I also felt like, I don't know about your Midwestern upbringing in that sense, but I was also an athlete. And I also feel like I kind of got swept into, the samsara of life, where, it was about, getting a girlfriend and, achieving different levels in my competitive life as a tennis player, joining a fraternity. And yet in the midst of all of that, there was also something that was missing. And it was almost like I didn't have the courage to act upon a deeper intuition or a deeper sense of what was happening within me. And I'm 51 years old, and it's taken me a long time in life to be able to, frankly, I don't know if I'm even there yet, where that I've felt the ability to just sort of be vulnerable and open myself up in a way. I'm really good at it when I travel. I've done some really profound travel in my life and as a seeker, but I didn't get into, truly, genuinely helping people or putting that at the front of the headline of my life until later in my life. And I think in part was somewhat of a hierarchy of needs type of situation where, you need to kind of take care of yourself and figure out, my grandmother told a really interesting, she made a point to me when I was probably in college, which was make sure your eyes see everything they need to see in this world. And I took that as go explore. And so I did. And yet I also feel like what was really underneath that message was sometimes you have to get into a deeper place within yourself. When you decided to go for a master's degree in spiritual psychology, was that kind of in line with, a progression that you had made through this whole process that you're talking about?
Yeah, I really relate to a lot of your story. And I think by the way you do an exceptional job of being vulnerable and authentic in the world, I'm just inspired by the quality of your sharing all the time, right?
Mm.
In normal conversations, it just seems like you have one setting which is deeply authentic, where I tend to at least just notice this oscillation. I can do more superficial if that's what I'm, instead of just pulling everybody to a deeper level and holding that's cool. So I just appreciate that about you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So one defining moment for me was, in 8th grade, I was kind of that prepubescent, really kind of conflicting attitudes with my dad at the time. And to his credit, instead of writing it off, he gave me, to the kind of preteen years or difficult age, gave me an Earl Nightingale cassette tape at the time, The Strangest Secret in the World. And that was the beginning for me of this at least a new way of thinking. So that didn't get to Wayne Dyer yet, or those kind of folks, but it did. So it was Earl Nightingale, Zig Ziglar, Dennis Waitley, and then Tony Robbins, and a bunch of these who were talking mindset. And that changed my life. That's all I listened to through high school. I didn't listen to music. I listened to cassette tapes on the way to school, on the way back to school, before bed, in the morning, hours and hours every day. And I was the most positive kid by a lot in my hometown.
Wow.
I mean, again, there was only a couple hundred of kids, so it was not a huge deal, but it got a lot of what I was looking for in terms of connection. But what I realized as I went through, one other part of that was the dichotomy that you kind of spoke to, that you got wrapped up in. For me, it was this definition of success. Success, especially to my father, who I was trying to prove myself to, was in the world. It was a job, it was money, security, but it was the exterior definition of success. That's how I thought I was going to be proving myself. So that took precedent over helping people. So I didn't go into the volunteer world or the nonprofit world. I went into, how can I make the most amount of money fastest so that I could retire and then do what I wanted to do and help people. That was where I got kind of early on, which will play out because it was an exercise that I was given much later around redefining success that really broke it just gave me more freedom around how success would be defined for me. And that financial success could be one element of it, but not the entire thing. And that I didn't have to wait to be helping the world or helping others or being the person I wanted to be until after I was, in this case, Maslow's hierarchy as well, had taken care of those other things. So that had kind of was a big pivot, and that happens, kind of a little bit later. But those two things, being put on to the positive self-help folks in terms of mindset and beliefs and goal setting and all those things, and then getting that even being positive was still shallow for me. I ended up having a very beautiful life, traveled, through my 20s, through college. I made friends easily. I was welcome everywhere, but I was missing too. And the depth wasn't there for me. And it felt like I knew how to be okay in this narrow framework, but anything more than that. And I did everything I could to avoid feeling certain things. I did everything I could to avoid conversations that weren't comfortable. So my life experience ended up being very regulated to a small band, which meant I could only hang out with people for so long. So the depth of my relationships was less than what I know now is available. So all of that was leading. Also in the career, things were working and money was coming and success in that exterior. But I remember being in my 20s and having, being a partner in a company, making good money, working with great people, friends of mine, but it was in a field that didn't speak to my heart. And I would wake up every 6 months or so and be like, if I die now, this isn't why I came. Right. And I would have that awareness, and then it'd be like, yeah, but what else are you going to do? And it would go back down, but it did get louder and louder. And then it was where I started to really be open to, and it was a serendipitous, if I could, can I share one story on that?
Absolutely.
So I'm in a, I think the beautiful thing about life is that our path gets revealed to us. The more aware, the more conscious we are, the subtler the messages need to be. But if we're not listening, it gets louder and louder and louder and louder. And in whatever area of our life really needs the attention. So in this case, I was somewhat aware, and this is how it showed up for me. I was in line at lunch at a place in Austin, Texas, where I was living at Jason's Deli. So there's this long line, it's lunchtime, and this pretty woman comes in, and she's obviously in a hurry, and it kind of looks around, and she's like, oh, I could just feel that she was rushed. And I said, do you want to jump in line in front of me? And she's like, thank you so much. She does, pays, leaves. As I'm still kind of finishing, she comes back in, same look on her face. And I'm like, did you forget something? She's like, yes. Do you want to jump in front? She's like, yes, please. Thank you. And anyway, so she does that twice. As she's leaving, she turns and she says, you know what? I'm really not in that big of a hurry. I'm so sorry. And she stops, and in a moment, she goes to a place that I immediately became emotional with how raw and honest she was being with me. And she said, I really appreciate how you just showed up. Thank you. Have a great day. And we had a little conversation. I did end up seeing her again. And I was just like blown away. Like she was just this being and the way she was I had never even heard of before in a human. And so when I did get a chance to talk to her a little bit more, and she had just graduated from the University of Santa Monica, where I did my master's program. And when she told me about it, I didn't realize that was a thing, and, called, applied, and I was enrolled a couple of days later.
Wow. What a cool story.
So thanks for letting me share that. I don't share that often, but
I appreciate that. Yeah. This feels like some secret garden kind of material for sure. Success. You mentioned success, and I know Enjoy Global, and it seems the mission of the company is a lot around success. You also mentioned, if I die, this isn't what I was here to do, which sounds a little to me like stoicism, where you're sort of thinking about, if everything was gone, what would be left, or at least that there's a mission for you. What is your definition of success, and how does that show up in your day-to-day life and how you've built this company?
Yeah, beautiful. So the exercise that really changed this for me, which has been really pivotal in terms of the course of my entire life, was take the sentence, I know I'm successful if, or I know I'm successful when, and then fill that in 3 different ways. Right. And then they had a big list of kind of sample ones. I know I'm successful when I'm the president of a company. I know I'm successful when I have a beautiful, loving relationship. I know I'm successful when I'm healthy and at my ideal weight. Like, so, just all of those, which are really beautiful thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And as I reflected on those and started coming down, it started to narrow, like, okay. And for me, the three that I landed on was, I did the easiest one for me was still in that financial realm. It was to have enough money that I didn't have to worry about taking care of my day-to-day needs ever, right? Like if I had that, that would be, I didn't need $1 billion, but if I didn't have to worry about my day-to-day bills, that would feel extraordinarily freeing, and that would be great. So there was a financial one. Then it was, if I had an abundance of energy every day to live life at the fullest in terms of whatever I was doing. Energy had always been an issue for me. I always felt tired. And so the idea of feeling alive and having energy as one of my success measures really resonated. And then finally, it was helping as many other people live the life of their dreams as possible. And that one also, as soon as I landed on that just felt great. I really loved the idea that I could play a role, however small, in someone else opening to whatever they wanted to do in their life. And then I would happily say, like, then the journey's been kind of meandering into how to deliver on those things and live into those three pillars in my life as I've moved forward, which have become the pillars. I met someone who's my business partner, and she shared a lot of the same principles and values, and that's what we built Enjoy on.
That's so beautiful. And, you can just feel the sort of the positive and mission driven intensity around when you say those three things. And, I think a lot about values as well. And, in my practice, I try to help people to kind of tease that out, not necessarily in that specific way, but, how do you want to show up? And if you're looking back on your life and, everyone's around your casket and you're able to sort of glean the moment, what do you want people to be saying? And I really feel like that when people have a deeper understanding of our mortality and have that sense that time is fleeting, that there isn't time to wait, it really does distill down to what is most essential. Another really pivotal moment in my life was in my mid-20s, where I went and I worked at a Tibetan Buddhist monastery in northern India. And the Lama there, and if you don't mind, I'll share a quick story as well.
Yeah.
So they just had a terrorist attack in the area at the sister monastery, and the Lama and the kind of the higher ups that were kind of running the place performed a practice called Tonglen, which was to bring in the pain and suffering, not only of those that lost their lives and those that loved those people, but also the terrorists themselves. And it was a really pivotal moment for me, thinking about humanity, where it's not this duality of those were the bad guys and we need to go get those people. But it kind of cut through something for me that felt really powerful. And so my experience there was really profound, because this man had the ability to ask those kinds of questions. Damon, what do you do? And I would go on and tell him my cover story, and he would just sit there in silence. And I was like, oh my God, I just screwed up this, what am I supposed to say? And he would do it day after day until he kind of like got me to be in the present moment with him. And then once I got in the present moment with him, then we were able to have a conversation around what mattered. And it was a really moving experience for me to start to think about, well, who am I? And not my cover story, but what is my secret garden? What matters to me on a deep level? And, now that's sort of, kind of morphed into values. And I think that when we know our why, and when we have that North Star, when we can kind of set our compass, we can manage the how. And I feel like I can kind of get knocked down, but not knocked off of my moorings, because when I get back up, I can sort of meander, as you say, back in the direction. And it also, I think, really allows for us to be more present, because in every moment, there's an opportunity to kind of take the next best step towards what it is that you care about. And so I really feel that, that's a really profound, simple practice, but really profound one.
How do you, working with elite athletes, I'm very curious now as a parent of a 5-year-old, and the conversation before I had Bodhi, the idea of watching parents who put their kids in sports at 3 and then in AAU clubs and really put them on a program before the kid really had any say in it. It was just, maybe there was some natural talent there. The parents were certainly into it, but the advantage that kid then has at ages 6, 7, and 8, after having 3 or 4 years of practice and coaching and all those things, becomes pretty visible. And then when you get all the way up into the college level is so competitive, or the Olympic level is so competitive, the areas that you work with, professional level, I always wonder what someone that in your world would say, is that worth it? What parental advice would you give? Because there does seem to be some advantages. It does seem to be unleashing some amazing talent, but I also feel at the expense of sometimes just life or being a kid or some of those things. Could you share your thoughts just in that arena?
Absolutely. Thanks for bringing all of that up. And I have to say, to your question, one of the larger blocks of clients that I have are those that are experiencing burnout. And those 3, 4, or 5-year-olds, when they're 13, 14, and 15, when they don't have the passion and the drive underneath, because it's not intrinsic. This was something that was forced upon them. And they were good at it early, as you say, and they were, superstars 6, 7, 8, 9. But it ended up becoming a slog and a job for most of them. Most of the high-level people that I know weren't great when they were young. And they didn't necessarily start that early. And they certainly didn't specialize. So those are 3 areas that I personally, I can see kind of, the calculus around that. So for me, it has to be fun. It has to be fun. There has to be a sense that the kid is steering the ship. And so for me, I have a daughter who's, nearly 8, and, I've resisted the temptation to become one of those dads who goes out and feeds the tennis balls to her. Right. But she does now, she has found an interest in it, and we'll go out and play. But as soon as she says, okay, that's good, that's it, I'm happy to walk to kind of end the session, and which goes against a lot of the things that, we preach in high performance. You have to have grit, you have to have discipline, you have to, right? All of that stuff. But we also know a lot more about sort of the developing brain. And if it becomes more of a job, or it becomes something where the, parents are smiling more when I hit the ball in, and trying to fix things when I hit the ball out. Now kids are associating their successes with the love of their parents. Yeah. And that to me is the one that's the most profound, and makes me sad when I work with 15-year-olds who they can't articulate that often, but that my graduate thesis on fear of failure. And what I saw in there was that the brain, obviously we know the amygdala is this ancient part of the brain that's really life or death, and warning signals and all of that. And so for a 15, 16-year-old, going out to compete at whatever level they're competing at feels like life or death. And it feels like the storyline goes, if I lose, dad isn't going to love me as much. Yeah. If dad doesn't love me as much, I'm not going to be as confident. And that's going to show up in the classroom. I'm not going to do as well in school. my grades won't be there. I'm not going to get into college. And literally I've heard kids go down this track where they find the finish line is that they're homeless and that they're not loved. So there's a real profound danger in the push.
As you're saying that, and I think that's fundamentally, if everyone kind of got that our main base building block is love, and the worst feeling that we could have is fear, or the absence of love, that being, the fear of not being loved. And so when things get paired like that, not only are they going out, where it's life or death, it's because if I don't succeed, I won't be loved. Basically, it's an exile, right? Which we know in the past was the worst form of punishment. You are now exiled and no longer a part of the community and loved. So I think it's interesting to hear you say that, because it makes sense at an elite athlete level. But in spiritual psychology, as you had kind of asked how I got into that, I think I met a lot of high performers who were drawn to this program, and from all different fields and different walks of life. And it's very similar, almost universal, that at some point, the uncoupling of how I paired what love means to me needs to get addressed. And sometimes that's much more subtle and not as obvious as a tennis match. But until we actually uncouple the fact that love just is, and isn't as a result or conditional around anything for our base nature, we're going to be struggling to fill a hole that has no bottom, right? Like we can never get enough of what we don't really need. And so this idea of being filled up with wins that's trying to fill a hole that says I'm not lovable or I'm not good enough, unless that'll never work, because there'll always be another match. There'll always be another thing that you have to do to keep the love. So it immediately empties, versus, going on a journey of trying to figure out that love is at the center and I can access that. And if I can, then everything else is something I'm doing, but it's not the same level of risk that I've associated with it, that most of us create that pair in 0 to 7, from in the early ages.
Right. That's really powerful. How does that show up for you as a parent with Bodhi? And I mean, do you catch yourself kind of unconsciously pushing towards, achievement, or are you capable of kind of keeping love at the center within your interactions?
It's been one of the most natural spaces for me. I hadn't known unconditional love from me. Probably for me, I would say, but I couldn't feel that. If people don't have an access point for unconditional love from them, we can't feel it for us. So it didn't matter how many people unconditionally loved me. I was only going to feel love conditionally. That's how I had it wired. And so when Bodhi came, that was the first real example of like, this little being just being here opens my heart in a way that I, have only really realized on drugs, right? Like that in ceremony and different places, that an ecstasy or an ayahuasca feeling and those kind of ceremonies. So here's this little being, and I feel grateful that my wife and I were just very much around like him and his experience. And so I have absolutely none of that. And what's been beautiful about that is, to your point, like watching his natural interest and then saying yes to that, versus like that's an discomfort. Recently with the lockdown, the shelter in place, we're looking for things to do. And one of the things that he and I started doing were arts and crafts in the morning. I would have an hour before work that I'd be able to spend with him. Well, arts and crafts is not something I know myself to be able to do. And to have a new idea every day, or to be able to make stuff out of what we have in the house. And so what I notice, as most parents do, is like, wait, I'm not comfortable with that. So let's not do that. Let's do something that I'm more comfortable with. And what I realized, again, he doesn't care at all. He's interested in this. But he doesn't care if it ends up looking like a house or a rabbit. He just wants to do that together. And so the idea that the first couple of things we made were very funny, right? And I could watch my my issues of like, oh, that doesn't look like what we're trying to make. Like that was a failure. And
Yeah.
then seeing him not care at all or laughing and having such a good time. And then being like, oh, wow, like this is just about doing. And we would, and then YouTube has been a great thing. I could watch little 5-minute craft things that in an hour I could do. So it was a really beautiful example. Again, being with, I think kids and parenting is one of the most beautiful spiritual journeys there is, if we're open to it, because they represent what's possible in terms of unconditional love, of excitement for life, of laughter and joy. And we lose, if we're not that still, it's because we lost it, not because we aren't it. And so it's, his reminder, he gives me the other big lesson I think that's been beautiful is I want to be more like that, not have him be more like me. So he gives me permission to laugh more, to be sillier, to not take myself so damn seriously. And when I'm in that, I like myself better. And so I think that has been its own beautiful, positive snowball effect.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's unlocked something inside of my heart as well to have a child. And, the way I frame the way we show up in the world is as an adult, I think most of us, we have these high beam flashlights and it's pointed way out there. And that's the goal. We have to get there. Whereas my daughter, she has this beautifully splayed lantern. And it just splays in this like couple feet radius around her. And she's like, oh, check that out. Oh, that's beautiful. Look at that cricket. Oh, wow. And I'm like, no, we have to go there.
We have to get there.
We have to get there. And she's
that
like,
idea.
No.
Yeah. Let's be here. Like the ultimate practice, which I think, whether it's in Northern India or Tibet or, for me, I remember doing, 7-day silent retreat in Thailand. And it's like, I don't actually have to go all the way, halfway around the world to study with a high-ranking monk from Burma. I could just watch my 4 or 5-year-old and be like, oh, that, like, let's, because it happens everywhere. We're going for a bike ride and he sees a bee on the ground or an ant or some sort of bug, and we stop, and that's the next 10 or 15 minutes instead of getting to the park where I thought we were going. and then just being with him and watching that, and that practice of really, hey, let that go. Like, that's not important. The being with him is important. Let that go. And all of that is, I think for me, it's been the greatest practice in consciousness, because it's really about all those fundamental truths of being present, of anchoring on the values that are most important, our connection, joy, happiness, and being. So that is, I think, I wish all parents to be, the sad thing is I think most of our lives have become so skewed where we're so busy and career has been so highlighted, and the need to provide in a certain way, that 2 incomes are super important. And, and then a lot of people end up missing, those moments that you just can't get back. I think that's one of those things to see, like, what at the end of the day, at the end of my life, what I really want more of, only more time with him, only more time with my wife. And that's it. And right now I feel full, because it's high quality and I can still then work. But if that ever gets out for a few days, I'm like, something's got to shift, because I'm doing more of a lower quality element in my life.
Right.
Yeah.
So many thoughts around all of that. I've been really meditating a lot on self-compassion lately. And, as we know, we say things to ourselves we wouldn't say to anyone else. And we're just, tremendously difficult on ourselves. And, as you say, having a child, it sort of opens up that spiritual, it's a vulnerability. It's kind of a heart explosion. And my daughter can come over and she can intuit when something is wrong with me, and she can put her hand on my arm or my back, and just kind of like, Daddy, are you okay? In a way that reminds me that, oh, that's right, I have to check in with myself. Yeah.
Do you feel, does her touch, like her energy, can you feel that shift something?
Absolutely.
I really notice that. And if anyone's ever, experienced good energy work or, healers, there's something that's very palpable with people who know what they're doing. And I find that often with Bodhi, and it's just holding my hand, or it's like, wow, like something just is happening because his energy is either pure or loving or something. And it can really help recenter me.
For sure. Yeah. I feel like kids are like Reiki masters.
Reiki masters. That's exactly. I feel like, man, this is it. Like, this is exactly what that feels like. Yeah.
Just come put your hand on me, honey, and
yeah.
and heal me. It's funny. So my co-host Jeremy, he when we were talking earlier in the year, and he had gone through a bout of depression, and he went and did a 5-day silent retreat. And through the retreat, and he's open about this, and he's going to explore this on a deeper level, but I'll just give you a little bit of the highlight of it. He just kind of cracked open and felt enlightened, felt like connected to everything. And then he came home, and some of the funny stories after, when he came home, he also has a daughter, and, Daddy, I don't really want to brush my teeth right now. That's okay. That's fine. And, Daddy, or just, not connecting back into the real world. Right. So I find that this is a really interesting place where, as you mentioned, we're busy with our lives, and we're so, 2 incomes, and we have to have the hustle and the bustle. Is it possible, Jeff, to be an enlightened being and still live in the day-to-day hustle bustle that we live in?
That was really a big question that we explored in the spiritual psychology program, because a lot of us had beautiful experiences in the Peruvian jungles or in Tibet or somewhere else. And it's like, while we're there, it seems like I can hold this space and everything's great, but that's not really the test. The test is, can we be enlightened? Can we have an enlightened way of being in the real world with back-to-back meetings and kids that are yelling in the background, and managing and juggling all of those things? That's the real work. And not that anyone can be enlightened on a mountaintop in a cave when there is no other challenges and nothing else coming at you, but it's certainly much easier if you remove all the distractions and all the pressures and all the things of today's life, which is what a lot of monks did in the past. And not to diminish that life, it's beautiful. But if you get rid of a lot of, their path of getting rid of, material desire and no marriage, and so no kids, well, a lot of the things that bring stress and joy into our lives, it's just easier if you're not dealing with any of that, versus most of us are dealing with it. So I think the real game is can you be in the world? And so for Jeremy, I'd love to ask the question, because I think that is it. Like, at some level, none of it matters, right? At the highest level, it's like, brush your teeth, don't brush your teeth, like whatever, it's all good. But the reality is, can you have a conversation with your son or daughter about why they need to brush their teeth where you still only feel love for them, and that's all they're experiencing, and they have to brush their teeth. Right. And you have things to do, because at some level, when you're feeling that good, like, that's it. We're all chasing a feeling. We're always all chasing a feeling. We all just only want to feel great. When we feel great, then we don't need to do anything, right? So at the highest level of that enlightenment, when everything feels phenomenal and we feel connected to everything, then there's no doing that would add to it. Right now, all doing is designed to add in some way to our feeling. So it makes sense, but so few of us ever get to that place. And even the people who are, some of the Indian gurus and different people that I love and are just wise, way showers on the planet, they're still doing in the world, because why not? Like, we're in a 3-dimensional world. We have to we might as well. It's just, they're not attached to the outcome. They're not attached to how you feel about them. And that is it. Like, to go through and they're just loving. And there's a handful of them that I watch and listen to, and it's just like, that guy's happy no matter who stands up and asks a hard question, difficult questions, challenges him. He's just like, he is just love. And I think that's the real game, is how to be, can we be in our day-to-day, still hold true to the values and the morality, or the way that we want our kids to be, or our team to be at work, but do it in a way that what they feel is, that person really cares about me.
Hmm.
They really see me, and they want the best for me. And what the best is, in their opinion, is holding me accountable for certain things, or having me live into a vision that they have for me. You know what I mean? So I think that
Mm-hmm.
would,
That's
that's,
beautiful.
yeah.
Yeah, which I mean, it feels like what you've created at Enjoy, and maybe a couple more minutes, and then we'll wrap it up. But it feels like what you've created is sort of an elegant, gamified way to help people to understand that this is it. Whatever we're doing right now is enough. And sure, we can have our high, hard goals, and we can have, the dreams, and we can gravitate towards certain, feelings, as you say. But when we take notice of the step that we just took, or that the experience that we're in currently, it tends to, at least it's done this for me, it tends to mitigate some of that duality, some of that sense that I have to feel like, oh, this has to feel good. Sometimes it's a slog. Sometimes things are not necessarily going to feel good. What's a tip or two for our audience who are listening to this thinking to themselves, my life is stressful and this all sounds really wonderful, you guys, but how do I remember to do this? I think it's a really beautiful thought that we need to remember what we forgot. And what we forgot is that we're all connected, and that love is at the center of all of this. How do I do that when I'm, on 101, stuck in traffic and people are, flipping me off and cutting me off?
Yeah. I think that's the question, right? And for our work at Enjoy, and our approach to it is that we need support. I mean, the amount of stuff that's coming at us to take us out of that peaceful, centered, grounded place it's a barrage. It's like the idea that any of us are strong enough by ourselves to do that all the time it's really not a good starting place.
Mm-hmm.
Versus having a community of people who are also on a journey, and there's a handful of small things that are totally doable on a day-to-day basis that aren't overwhelming in terms of time or difficulty. And in that, these small steps done together with support can change, are transformative. Like it's not, I think that's the beautiful thing about actually doing it in that way. Most of us really struggle with how goals work. We want to lose 20 pounds. We want a huge promotion. We want to start a business that makes millions of dollars a year. And we can see that picture, and we can do the vision board. I want the yacht, and I want this, and I want to help 1 million people, and all those things. But what do I do today that moves me one step closer in the direction that I can actually do, and that I don't feel overwhelmed with? And that's why I think most people don't keep their New Year's resolutions, if they even set them, is we get a picture of the big thing, but we forget the small stuff. And the small stuff is equally challenging without support, but it is doable. And so for us, and having coaches, and this is the other thing I just would mention, I think a lot of people, and this is a big place for me, is information is only half of the formula. We do need the ideas, but it's a mind and heart thing. And so all of the information, and I think we can ask anyone, what do we need to do to be in better shape or to be healthier? And 100% of everybody knows if we eat better, we get better, we get better sleep, we exercise, we reduce stress, that should work. But the number of people doing that is, exponentially smaller than who have the information. And so that's why we have to have both the information, guides, the experts in the fields, and all the books that we're drawn to reading. And then we need a simple way to take morsels of their wisdom, morsels of the practices that everyone says the same thing. Like this is not, you go back 2,000 years and everyone has been preaching pretty similar things in terms of creating and living a very fulfilled life. So just taking a couple of those things in a very bite-sized piece, that it's like, I can do that. And if we do that, I remember we were doing, last thing, I'm sorry, my brother and I had created a program for physical well-being health. He's a great chiropractor, and I had, been coaching, and we wanted to help people form, just feel great and be healthy in all ways. And so we had come up with this program, and then we interviewed a bunch of people and said, will you give us an hour? Will you give us, we started with, will you give us 2 hours a day if we guarantee in a year you will be like the exact person that you want physically, you will feel, and not one person said yes, absolutely not. I will not give you 2 hours a day. 1 hour a day, still 0% of the people would give us an hour every day. 30 minutes, a lot more said yes, but when? Yes, but when? And it was dependent on would it fit. When we got to 15 minutes and 10 minutes, 10 minutes was the magic number. When we asked, would you give us 10 minutes a day if we could totally change your life in a year? Not one person could look at us and actually say no without also having that little bit of awareness that then I just don't want it. Like now, if that's true, if they could actually do that in 10 minutes, now that's on me. I could find 10 minutes, no matter how many kids I have, no matter how busy I am at work. If I don't have 10 minutes for me, I just don't want it. And I think that's the big deal, is we have to be understanding that people's lives really are busy. And most people don't have 2 hours a day to meditate or do an hour of yoga or, but if we could start with 10 minutes a day, 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes at night, that's the game. And I think, that's really the crux, is if you can get yourself around a community of people, have a coach, and then get a gentle accountability structure so that it feels good, you're celebrating along the way, and you're doing a couple things each day, just simple, that you can definitely do. It's like, oh yeah, I could do that. I could definitely think of 3 things I'm grateful for first thing in the morning. I could definitely do one nice act of kindness to a stranger each day. Simple little thing, like things that I could do that would really elevate the quality of my life. Yeah.
It's beautiful. And we think a lot about snowball with stress. Stress comes in, cortisol, narrow focus, heart goes up, we lose the ability to creatively see the world around us. And we just kind of like, get tighter and tighter in that trash compactor. But it sounds like what you're saying is that same snowball effect can happen in a positive way, where if we just sort of set the conditions, do a few small things, we start to kind of build and develop. And I know that in my own life, that's been true, where, I wake up in the morning and I do my morning practices. And once I do that, it just sets the intention for my day. And it is interesting about people saying, I can't give you the time. And it does, to me, come back to why people are so disconnected from wanting to tend to and love their own selves. And I do feel like in a lot of ways we've been sold a bill of goods around what it is to be successful, back to your word. And that, that idea of external material success. And you see it all the time, lottery winners, celebrities, people who have achieved, sort of the quote unquote dream, are some of the most miserable people on the planet. Yeah. So I feel like, I'm coming kind of full circle to Siddartha, which just really was a profound thing in my early 20s. Herman Hesse, after he wrote the book, had written one of his friends, and his quote that he wrote in this letter to his friend was, Siddartha in the end does not learn true wisdom from any teacher, but from a river that roars in a funny way, and from a kindly old fool who always smiles and is secretly a saint. And to me, that's the essence of kind of finding that peace and love within us to then let radiate out, as our children sort of inherently still have. And I love the visual of not wanting her to be, or your son to be more like you, but you being more like him. And I think for adults, that sometimes we forget about the fact that the magic that we felt as children is still possible today. What do you have for our audience in your secret garden for a few final words, Jeff?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm very grateful. This has been a profound conversation. I just really love it. And that would be my kind of final thought, is making time for deep conversations, whether you're listening, but be challenged to go deep and see what's inside of you, and just playing around in the depths of who each of you are is is worth it. It's so worth it to explore what's inside, the richness and the everything that we're looking for. Really, it's all about a journey home. I once heard, one of my teachers said that all growth in spirituality is letting go. There's nothing that we're adding on. It's all a process of letting go of stuff we picked up. And I think that's beautiful, because that just always makes me feel lighter. Like, I'm enough. I actually just got to get rid of some stuff. This belief doesn't work for me. Like that belief isn't serving me anymore. I'm not adding, I could let my love flow a little bit more here, but just this idea that, the journey is really about letting go instead of adding on. And how does that feel, just playing in that?
Ah, that's perfect. I really appreciate you.
Likewise. I'm just so grateful to know you.
Grateful to know you too. Thank you for sharing the time. As we know, flow is most found in deep conversations. And I can say assuredly, this was a flowing conversation for me. Thank you so much, Jeff. Appreciate it very much. And I will be talking to you soon.
Thank you.
Stimulus and Response is hosted by Damon Valentino and Jeremy N. Smith and produced by Matt Mullins at Black Rooster Productions. Please rate, review, and share the show. And please join us next time for another stimulating exploration of the best parts, best ways of being human and being alive.